Today I will tell you about someone I watched closely for about 3 years as he built his independent consulting practice. He had left a serious role, chief operating officer of a sizable logistics business. He was sharp, well-networked, genuinely impressive guy. And his positioning was right. It was all about logistics. And his first clients were exactly the right kind. The practice was starting to take shape as a consulting powerhouse. And then about a year in, a piece of work came along that was slightly outside of what he'd built his practice around. It wasn't dramatically wrong, it was just slightly off. A manufacturing client instead of a logistics company. It was operational work, but with a heavier transformation component around digitization than he had ever done before. It was good money, the kind that probably eases the pressure considerably when you're still building your pipeline. And so he ended up saying yes to the work. And then he said yes again to the next one that was slightly different, and then the next one that was different again. 2 years later, yeah, he had a practice and he was busy paying the bills for sure. But his consulting practice as a business had completely lost its shape. No client could really quite say what he did anymore, including himself. And he hadn't made any dramatic mistakes. He just said yes carefully and probably understandably to a series of slightly wrong things. Now, that's not a pipeline problem, and it's also not a positioning problem. That's what I call a governance problem. And it's one of the most common mistakes you have to prepare for as an independent advisor. For those who don't know me, my name is Arndt Halbach. Over the last 20 years, I've worked with more than 1,000 senior executives, helping them build and scale successful independent consulting practices. And the story I just told you is one I've watched play out more times than I'd like to count. And so in this video, I want to show you how to avoid this. Now, here's something worth understanding about the corporate environment you're planning to leave or, have left. Something most people only notice once it's really gone. It had guardrails built into the structure, not designed specifically for you as a manager, but because large institutions run on discipline by default. The budget decisions that needed approval, strategic shifts got challenged by the CFO, a board would ask uncomfortable questions about your project definition, legal would review your kind of risky looking things, and so your own management chain also probably pushed back when you started moving towards something that they hadn't signed off on. You may not have loved all of those constraints in the moment, I'm sure, but they did something valuable that you probably never really noticed. They protected you from the pull of short-term pressure, from the temptation to say yes to things that felt reasonable individually to you, but were moving your focus away from what the business actually needed. And then now when you go independent, those guardrails will disappear for you. There's no CFO to ask whether this client makes strategic sense. There's no board to push back on the fee you've just discounted. No one standing between you and the next slightly wrong piece of work, except yourself. And that's a genuinely different environment to operate in, especially when the financial pressure is real and your client pipeline is still early. Let me describe the drift pattern, because it almost never looks dramatic from the inside. It actually starts with pricing. Look, you have a pricing floor, a rate below which the work doesn't make commercial sense to you. And then a piece of work comes along that you really want, from a client you'd really like. They push back on the fee, and just this one time you're going like, okay, I'll still do it, because the relationship is important to you. And then it continues with the scope of the work. You're engaged to help with one specific thing. Now, partway through the engagement, the client will ask you, hey, can you take a look at something slightly off? Would only take an hour, so they're good clients, so you take a look, and then you look at something else, and gradually your engagement that you priced for is covering kind of 3 times the work that you planned for. Ultimately, your positioning also drifts, and that's the third one. Work actually that's slightly outside of the lane you've built, but it pays, and you're good enough to do it, so you take it, and then the next one just like it, and so on. Now, each of those feels completely reasonable in the moment. There's a good argument for every single one. But together, over months, over years, they erode something. Your positioning will start to blur, which means your pricing power softens. Your credibility as someone who knows exactly what they do and who they do it for quietly fades. And the frustrating thing, you've been working the whole time. You just haven't been building something. So drift really doesn't announce itself, it accumulates. So what does governance actually look like for an independent senior advisor? Because it's not a rule book anybody gives to you, and it's not about being inflexible. It's a small set of filters. 3 things that you will decide in advance for yourself and that you apply consistently even when the pressure is on. Number 1, you need to have a clear definition of the right work. Now, what does the right piece of work actually look like for you? Not a vague aspiration, a specific description. The right sector, the right type of problem, the right type of client, specific enough that you can compare any new opportunity that comes in against that filter and get an honest answer for yourself. If it fits, you proceed, great. If it doesn't, decline the work, or you price it as a one-off rather than core work, but that's a different story. Filter number 2 is your pricing floor. Look, you gotta have a minimum below which you don't go, regardless of the relationship or any other reason that you come up with in the moment. And you're not being rigid, it's just that underpricing your work signals what you believe you're worth. And it sets the expectation for every subsequent conversation that you will ever have with that client or with other companies. And filter number 3 is also very important, scope boundaries. What do I mean by that? It's how you define the edges of an engagement before it starts. What's in and what's explicitly not included in that engagement. What happens if the client needs more from you than was originally scoped? And that's not bureaucracy. It's what keeps a 3 months engagement from quietly becoming a 6 months one, and at the same price. And that's the hard part, you need to apply those 3 filters consistently, especially when someone is sitting across from you with a compelling argument for why this particular situation is different, right? Most situations do feel different from the inside. The discipline is applying the filter anyway. I think in advisory work, your credibility depends as much on what you decline as on what you accept. Every well-reasoned no signals something about your standards. Every compromise signals something different too, right? There's something I've watched happen consistently with the executives who built governance deliberately into their system, who design the filters and actually apply them. Look, they become easier to refer because when somebody knows exactly what they do and they also know exactly what they won't do, well, when your definition of the right work is clear enough that a contact can compare any opportunity against it and immediately know whether it's a fit or not, they refer you with confidence. They don't have to guess, they know. And there's something else. The clients you turn away often actually will come back. Not always, but often enough. They will go to the cheaper option first or to a generalist, and then a year later, they will call you because what they actually needed was the thing you said they did. Governance isn't about being rigid. It's about being clear. Clear enough about what you do and who you do it for that the right work will find you, and clear enough about what you don't do and what the wrong work is so it stops showing up and just stealing your time. And look, governance is the 3rd component of what I call the flywheel. That's really the engine at the heart of the second curve architecture. I've got the full framework, every component, every layer in the anchor video on this channel. If this drift pattern I've described in this video sounds familiar or sounds like something you can already see coming, I think the architecture is the answer for you. Link is in the description. I'll see you there.